The research station floated alone in the darkness of space, a small metal flower blooming at the edge of known territory. Inside, Dr. Kelvin Chen stared at his coffee mug and wondered, not for the first time, why he had accepted this assignment. The Galactic Council had built this outpost 3 years ago to keep an eye on human space. They called it a diplomatic station, but Kelvin knew the truth. They wanted to watch humanity like scientists watching bacteria in a dish. Ambassador Thelrax clicked his mandibles together as he entered the observation deck. The insectoid diplomat stood nearly 7 feet tall, his chitinous body reflecting the starlight that came through the windows. His compound eyes fixed on Kelvin with what the human had learned to recognize as concern. "You are troubled, Dr. Chen," Thelrax said. His voice came through a translator device on his chest, giving his words a mechanical quality. Kelvin shrugged. "Just thinking about home. Earth is 2 weeks away by the fastest ship. Might as well be on the other side of the universe." Thelrax made a chittering sound that meant amusement. "Your species has only possessed faster-than-light travel for 20 cycles. You should be grateful to be here at all. Most species wait centuries before the Council notices them." "Lucky us," Kelvin said, taking another sip of his coffee. The station housed 43 beings from 12 different species. Most of them were scientists and diplomats like Kelvin and Thelrax. A handful of security officers kept watch, though they rarely had anything to watch for. This region of space was quiet. Boring even. That was supposed to be the point. The alarm shattered the peaceful moment like a hammer through glass. Red lights flooded the observation deck. The station's AI Iris spoke in her calm, emotionless voice. "Warning. Multiple hostile vessels detected. Classification: Crash Dominion warships. Distance 3 million kilometers and closing. All personnel report to emergency stations." Kelvin felt his heart drop into his stomach. The Crash Dominion. He had heard stories about them. Every species in the galaxy had heard stories about them. The Crash were conquerors, slavers, and destroyers. They took what they wanted and burned the rest. Thelrax's mandibles clacked together rapidly, a sign of extreme stress. This cannot be happening. The Crash have never attacked a council station before. The treaties. Treaties don't mean much if no one enforces them, Kelvin said, already moving toward the door. "Come on. We need to get to the command center." The corridors filled with frightened beings running in every direction. Kelvin pushed through the crowd, Thelrax close behind him. They reached the command center to find chaos. The station commander, a tall, blue-skinned Valesian named Commander Yorth, stood at the main display screen. His face had turned pale, almost white. "How many ships?" Thelrax demanded. 15, Yorth said quietly. 15 Crash warships. Our defenses will hold for perhaps 6 hours. Maybe 8 if we are fortunate. What about reinforcements? Kelvin asked. The council must have ships nearby. Yorth shook his head. The nearest council fleet is 2 days away. We have already sent the distress signal. They are coming, but they will not arrive in time. 2 days. Kelvin felt sick. The Crash would tear through the station in hours, not days. Everyone here would be dead or captured long before help arrived. He thought about the Crash slave markets, about the stories of what happened to prisoners. Death might be the better option. "We have to do something," Kelvin said. "We can't just sit here and wait to die." "What would you suggest?" Yorth asked, his voice heavy with defeat. "We are a research station, not a military base. Our weapons are minimal. Our shields are designed to stop asteroids, not warship cannons." Kelvin's mind raced. There had to be something they could do. Some way to buy more time. Then an idea struck him, crazy and desperate. "What about Earth?" he asked. "What about the human fleet?" The room went silent. Several aliens turned to stare at him. Thelrax clicked his mandibles softly. "Dr. Chen," the ambassador said gently, "humanity's navy is limited. You have only a handful of warships, and they are spread thin protecting your home system. Even if they could help, Earth is weeks away from here." "We have to try," Kelvin insisted. "Let me send a message, please." Yorth looked at him for a long moment, then nodded. "Very well. It cannot hurt. Iris, open a quantum channel to Earth Space Command." Kelvin stepped up to the communications console. His hands shook as he typed in the emergency codes. The signal would take several minutes to reach Earth, then several more for a response. If anyone even answered. Earth's navy was small and new. The other species were right about that. Humanity had only a few dozen warships, most of them barely tested. The Kresh ships appeared on the view screen, dark and angular like knives cutting through space. They moved in perfect formation, confident and unhurried. They knew the station could not fight back. They knew no one would arrive to help. The first weapons blast struck the station's outer shields. The entire structure shuddered. Lights flickered. Someone screamed. "Shields at 70%, Iris reported. Rate of fire suggests shield failure in 4 hours 32 minutes. 4 hours. Less time than Yorth had predicted. Kelvin watched the screen, waiting for a response from Earth. The seconds crawled by like hours. Finally, a message appeared. Text only, no video. Kelvin's heart sank as he read it. Message received. Earth Space Command acknowledges your distress. However, nearest military vessels are 3 weeks away, unable to provide immediate assistance. Recommend evacuation if possible. Godspeed. 3 weeks. They might as well have said 3 years. Kelvin slumped in his chair, the last spark of hope dying in his chest. Thelrax placed one of his thin arms on Kelvin's shoulder. I am sorry, my friend. At least you tried. Another blast hit the shields. Then another. The Kresh were taking their time playing with their prey. Kelvin looked around the command center at all the frightened faces. Different species, different worlds, but all of them wore the same expression of terror and despair. We should evacuate as many as possible, Yorth said. Get them to the escape pods. Perhaps some will survive long enough for the Council fleet to find them. The Kresh will just hunt them down, someone said. They always do. Kelvin stood up. He felt strangely calm now, the panic replaced by cold determination. If he was going to die here, he would not die cowering in a corner. Then we make them work for it, he said. We have 4 hours. Let's make them count. The view screen showed the Kresh ships moving closer, weapons glowing with deadly light. Behind them, the stars watched in silence, cold and distant and uncaring. No one was coming to save them, no one at all. The Kresh warship hung in space like a predator watching its wounded prey. War Prime Shakros stood on the bridge, his scaled hands clasped behind his back. He studied the small research station through the view screen with satisfaction. This would be an easy victory, another jewel to add to his collection of conquered worlds. Status, he commanded, his voice a deep rumble. His tactical officer, a younger Kresh with bright green scales, consulted his display. Their shields are weakening as predicted, War Prime. Another hour and we can begin boarding operations. Minimal resistance expected, Shakros nodded. The Galactic Council had grown soft over the centuries. They built stations like this one without proper defenses, trusting in treaties and diplomacy to protect them. Fools. In the end, only strength mattered. Only power. Prepare the boarding teams, Shakros ordered. I want prisoners. The Council will pay well for their people back. On the station, Kelvin worked frantically in one of the maintenance corridors. He had pulled up floor panels and was connecting wires to the power conduits beneath. Sweat dripped down his face despite the cool air. His hands moved quickly, guided by an idea that was probably crazy but might buy them a few more minutes. Thelrax watched from the corridor entrance, his compound eyes reflecting concern. Dr. Chen, what exactly are you doing? Making a surprise, Kelvin said, not looking up from his work. The Kresh will board us soon. When they do, they will expect weak resistance, scientists and diplomats with basic weapons. They won't expect traps. Traps? Thelrax clicked his mandibles in confusion. You mean like the hunting snares primitive species use? Exactly like that, Kelvin said with a grim smile. Humans spent thousands of years fighting each other before we reached the stars. We got very good at it. Now help me carry these power cells. Over the next 2 hours, Kelvin set up his surprises throughout the station. He rigged doors to explode when opened. He turned maintenance robots into crude bombs. He flooded certain corridors with flammable gas that could be ignited remotely. The station's other residents thought he was insane. Even Thelrax seemed doubtful. This is not how civilized species fight, the ambassador said as Kelvin worked on yet another trap. That's the point, Kelvin replied. The Kresh think they know what to expect. Let's prove them wrong. Commander Yorth contacted them through the comm system. His voice sounded strained, exhausted. Dr. Chen, the shields are at 15%. They will breach us within 30 minutes. The Council fleet is still 36 hours away. 36 hours. Kelvin clenched his jaw. They had bought some time with their desperate resistance, but not enough. Not nearly enough. Still, he would not give up. Could not give up. It was not in his nature. The shields finally collapsed with a sound like breaking glass. Alarms wailed throughout the station. Iris spoke in her eternally calm voice, announcing what everyone already knew. They were defenseless now. The crash boarding pods slammed into the station's hull like metal fists. Kelvin heard the impacts even from deep inside the corridors. The sound of cutting torches followed as the invaders burned through the outer walls. They were coming. Kelvin crouched behind a corner, holding a makeshift weapon he had built from a plasma welder. His heart hammered in his chest. He could hear the Kresh soldiers moving through the station, their heavy footsteps echoing on the metal floors. They spoke to each other in their harsh, guttural language. They sounded confident, amused even. The first Kresh soldier rounded the corner into Kelvin's corridor. The alien was massive, nearly 8 feet tall and covered in thick scales that looked like natural armor. He carried a weapon that hummed with deadly energy. His eyes widened in surprise when he saw Kelvin. That moment of surprise cost him his life. Kelvin triggered the trap. The corridor floor exploded upward, sending shrapnel and flames into the Kresh soldier. The alien went down with a roar of pain and rage. "Now," Kelvin shouted into his communicator. Throughout the station, similar traps triggered. Doors exploded. Robots detonated. Corridors filled with fire and smoke. The Kresh advance stopped, their soldiers suddenly cautious and afraid. The weak prey had teeth after all. War Prime Shakros watched his casualty reports with growing anger. 20 soldiers dead, 30 wounded. How was this possible? This was supposed to be a simple boarding operation. These were scientists, not warriors. What was happening? "There is a human on the station," his tactical officer reported. "The prisoners say he is responsible for the traps." "One human?" Shakros growled. "One human is doing this?" "It appears so, War Prime." Shakros slammed his fist on the console. Humans. He had heard about them. A new species barely spacefaring, considered primitive by council standards. They were supposed to be harmless, weak. Yet this one was making his elite soldiers look like fools. "Find him," Shakros ordered. "Bring him to me alive. I want to look into the eyes of this human before I tear him apart." Kelvin ran through the smoke-filled corridors, his lungs burning. Behind him, he could hear the Kresh soldiers shouting. They were angry now, hunting him specifically. Good. Every minute they spent chasing him was a minute someone else might survive. He ducked into a storage room and sealed the door behind him. His makeshift weapon was almost out of power. He had used most of his traps. He was running out of tricks, running out of time, running out of hope. Thelrax found him there, the ambassador having fled from his own hiding spot. The insectoid diplomat looked terrified, his entire body shaking. "Dr. Chen, we must surrender. They will kill everyone if we continue to resist." "They'll kill everyone anyway," Kelvin said quietly. "Or worse. This way, at least we're not making it easy for them. But this is madness. This is not how things are done. Civilized species negotiate, compromise, find peaceful solutions." Kelvin looked at his friend with sad eyes. "Thelrax, the Kresh aren't a civilized species. They're predators. And when a predator comes for you, you have 2 choices. You can roll over and die. Or you can fight back with everything you have." Humans learned that lesson a long time ago. An explosion rocked the storage room. The Kresh were using heavy weapons now, blasting through walls instead of using doors. They were done playing games. Kelvin checked his communicator. 24 hours since the attack began, still 12 hours until the Council fleet arrived. Might as well be 12 years. He looked at Thelrax and saw his own despair reflected in those alien eyes. The storage room door blasted inward. Kresh soldiers poured through, their weapons raised. Kelvin lifted his welding tool one last time, knowing it was useless, knowing this was the end. At least he had fought. At least he had tried. Then impossibly Iris spoke. Her calm voice cut through the chaos like a knife through water. "Alert. Multiple vessels detected dropping out of faster-than-light travel. Classification unknown. Configuration military. Distance 2 million kilometers and closing rapidly. Identification confirmed. Vessels are of human origin. Transponder signals identify them as Earth Space Command, 3rd Expeditionary Fleet." Kelvin's heart stopped. Human ships here? That was impossible. Earth was weeks away. The message had said no help was coming. This could not be real, but Thelrax heard it too. The ambassador's mandibles clacked together in shock. Humans, but how? On his warship, War Prime Shakros stared at his tactical display in disbelief. 18 new contacts had appeared on his sensors, all broadcasting human identification codes. 18 warships appearing from nowhere, moving at aggressive speeds toward his position. He laughed. He could not help it. Humans, the galaxy's newest and weakest species, coming to challenge the might of the Kresh Dominion. This would be entertaining, at least. After he destroyed this pathetic human fleet, he would return to the station and finish what he started. All ships combat formation, Shakros ordered. Let us show these primitives what real warriors look like. The human fleet did not slow down. They did not send messages or demands. They simply came, burning through space like avenging angels, weapons already charging for war, and Kelvin, crouched in that storage room with Kresh soldiers surrounding him, felt something he had not felt in hours. He felt hope. Admiral Sarah Okonkwo stood on the bridge of the HSNS Indomitable, her dark eyes fixed on the tactical display. The research station appeared as a small blue dot, surrounded by angry red markers representing Kresh warships. Her jaw tightened. They had arrived just in time. Distance to enemy fleet? She asked, her voice calm and steady despite the tension in the air. 1.8 million kilometers in closing, her tactical officer replied. Kresh ships are moving to intercept. They're forming a defensive screen around the station. Good, Admiral Okonkwo said. Let them feel confident. Weapons status? All railguns loaded and ready. Missile tubes hot. Nuclear warheads armed and awaiting your command, Admiral. Captain Marcus Webb stood beside her, his weathered face showing a slight smile. He commanded the Indomitable, but Admiral Okonkwo led the fleet. They probably think we're crazy coming at them like this, he said quietly. They probably think we're weak, the Admiral replied. Every species in the galaxy thinks humanity is weak, primitive. 20 years in space and we still use kinetic weapons instead of proper energy shields. We still fire solid projectiles instead of plasma beams. We fight like barbarians, they say. And what do we say, Admiral? Her smile was cold and sharp. We say that barbarians win wars. On War Prime Shakros's flagship, the mood was almost festive. The Kresh crew laughed and made bets on how quickly they would destroy the human ships. Shakros himself felt a surge of anticipation. Finally, something interesting to break up the boredom of this easy conquest. Analysis of human vessels, Shakros commanded. His tactical officer worked quickly. Scans show primitive construction, War Prime. Their armor is simple steel alloy, reinforced but nothing special. Their power signatures are weak compared to our vessels. They appear to be using chemical propulsion for their primary weapons. I am detecting what looks like solid projectile weapons and primitive explosive missiles. The bridge crew burst into laughter. Solid projectiles? Missiles with chemical explosives? What was this, the Stone Age? The Kresh had abandoned such crude technology thousands of years ago. Energy weapons were faster, more precise, more elegant. These humans were fighting with museum pieces. They are either very brave or very stupid, Shakros said, his voice thick with amusement. Let us find out which. All ships, fire at will. Destroy them quickly so we can return to the station. The Kresh fleet opened fire first. Blue beams of concentrated energy lanced across the darkness, each one capable of melting through armor plating like butter. The beam struck the human ship's dead center. The Kresh crew cheered. Then their cheers died in their throats. The energy beams splashed harmlessly against the human ship's armor. The simple steel alloy glowed white-hot where the beams hit, but it did not melt. It did not break. The human ships kept coming, not even slowing down. Impossible, the tactical officer whispered. Our weapons should have penetrated their armor easily. Shakros leaned forward, his earlier amusement turning to unease. Explain. I do not know, War Prime. Their armor should not be able to withstand our energy weapons unless their alloy composition is specifically designed to dissipate heat. But that would mean they built their ships specifically to fight energy weapons. But they only joined Galactic Society 20 cycles ago, Shakros said slowly. How would they know to do that? On the Indomitable's bridge, Admiral Okonkwo allowed herself a small smile. The Kresh had just learned their first lesson about humanity. Earth's engineers had studied every ship design they could find in Council databases. They had noted that every advanced species used energy weapons, so humanity had built ships designed to defeat energy weapons. Simple, practical, human. All ships, she said into the fleet comm. Fire! The human fleet opened fire as one. The darkness of space lit up like a fireworks display. But these were not the clean, precise energy beams the galaxy was used to. These were crude, brutal, overwhelming waves of destruction. Railguns fired solid tungsten slugs at a significant fraction of light speed. Each slug massed several tons and hit with the force of a small nuclear weapon. They punched through the Kresh ship's energy shields like they were not even there. Shields designed to deflect or absorb energy simply could not stop solid matter moving that fast. The first Kresh destroyer exploded, its shields useless against the kinetic impact. Then a second. Then a third. Missiles followed the railgun barrage, hundreds of them, each one guided by surprisingly smart computers that the Council had dismissed as primitive. The missiles weaved and dodged, overwhelming the Kresh point defense systems with sheer numbers. Many were shot down, but many more got through. Nuclear fire bloomed in the void. The Kresh used fusion reactors and antimatter warheads. They considered nuclear fission weapons to be ancient, barely worth considering. They had forgotten how destructive those ancient weapons could be. War Prime Chakros gripped his command console as his flagship shook under the impacts. Alarms wailed throughout the bridge. Damage reports flooded in from every ship in his fleet. 3 destroyers gone, 2 cruisers crippled. His own flagship's shields at 40% and dropping. "Return fire," he roared. "All weapons! Destroy those ships!" The Kresh fleet fired again, pouring every weapon they had into the human formation. Energy beams, plasma torpedoes, graviton disruptors, everything. The humans had to fall back. They had to retreat. No species could withstand this much firepower. The human ships kept coming. Their armor glowed orange and red from the heat, but it held. Here and there, a ship took critical damage and fell behind. But the rest pressed forward, firing again and again, their crude weapons tearing through the Kresh fleet like paper. "They fight without honor," Chakros' second-in-command said, his voice shaking. "They use overwhelming firepower instead of skill. They attack in swarms like insects instead of fighting ship to ship. This is not warfare, this is butchery." Chakros said nothing. He watched as another of his cruisers exploded, torn apart by a railgun slug moving too fast to dodge. The humans were not fighting like the civilized species of the galaxy. They were fighting to win, using every advantage they had, holding nothing back. Small craft poured from the human carriers, hundreds of tiny fighters and bombers. The Kresh had abandoned carrier warfare millennia ago as inefficient. Large ships were better, more powerful. But now those small craft swarmed through the Kresh formation like angry hornets, their missiles and guns finding weak points in the larger ship's armor. Admiral Okonkwo watched the battle unfold with satisfaction. The Kresh were good fighters, she had to give them that. Their ships were well designed and their crews were trained. But they had forgotten the first rule of warfare. The enemy gets a vote. The Kresh had expected the humans to fight like everyone else, to use energy weapons and advanced shields and elegant tactics. They had not expected humanity to fight like humanity, using raw kinetic force and overwhelming numbers and absolutely ruthless efficiency. "Strike Group Alpha, flank them from the left," the Admiral ordered. "Beta Group target their flagship." I want that War Prime to feel this personally. The human ships moved with surprising coordination for such a new species. They split into smaller groups, each one targeting a specific Kresh vessel, firing in coordinated volleys that no shield could withstand. It was brutal. It was inelegant. It was devastatingly effective. Captain Webb studied the tactical display. "They're breaking formation. I think they're preparing to retreat." "Do not let them," Admiral Okonkwo said, her voice cold. "They came here to attack a peaceful research station. They came here to kill or enslave innocent people. We will teach them what happens when you threaten humanity's friends." The order went out. The human ships pressed harder, their weapons firing faster, their missiles launching in greater numbers. This was not just a battle. This was a message. A message written in fire and steel and nuclear fury. The message was simple. Humanity had arrived, and humanity did not forgive. On the station, Kelvin watched through a cracked view screen as the human fleet tore through the Kresh formation. Tears ran down his face, though he could not say if they were tears of relief or joy or simple exhaustion. Beside him, Thelrax stared in shock, his mandibles hanging open. "They came," the ambassador whispered. "The humans came, but how? How is this possible?" Kelvin laughed, the sound half hysterical. "Because we're human, we show up. We always show up." The Kresh soldiers who had been about to execute them stood frozen, watching their fleet die in the cold void of space. Their weapons lowered slowly, their confidence shattered like their ships. Outside, the human warships continued their terrible work, descending on the creche like avenging angels wrapped in steel and fire. War Prime Shakros knew he was going to die. The realization came to him slowly, like ice water spreading through his veins. His flagship shuddered under another railgun impact and the lights flickered. Half his fleet was gone. The other half was scattered, burning, dying. War Prime, we must retreat, his tactical officer said, his voice high with panic. We cannot win this battle. Shakros wanted to argue, wanted to rage against the impossibility of it all. The Creche Dominion did not lose to primitives, did not flee from inferior species, but he looked at the tactical display and saw the truth written in the positions of human warships. If they stayed, they would all die. All ships fall back to rally point 7, he commanded, the words tasting like poison. Execute emergency jump as soon as you are clear of the gravity well. The surviving Creche vessels turned and ran. Their powerful engines burned bright as they accelerated away from the battle. Behind them, the human fleet pursued like wolves after wounded deer, relentless, tireless, merciless. On the Indomitable, Admiral Okonkwo watched the Creche retreat with cold satisfaction. Pursue them to the system edge. I want them to remember this day every time they close their eyes. Should we let them escape, Admiral? Captain Webb asked. We have them on the run. We could finish them. No, Okonkwo said. Let them go. Let them carry the word back to their dominion. Let them tell everyone what happens when you attack humans and their allies. The Creche flagship managed to jump just as the human pursuit closed in. 2 more Creche ships were not so lucky. Railgun slugs tore through their engines as they tried to escape, leaving them crippled and adrift. The remaining Creche vessels vanished into faster-than-light travel, fleeing into the darkness like beaten dogs. Admiral Okonkwo turned her attention to the station. All ships defensive formation around the research station. Deploy Marine units for boarding. Medical teams on standby. Let us see who we can save. The human Marines launched from their carriers in small assault pods. Each pod carried a dozen soldiers in full combat armor. They moved quickly toward the damaged station, their weapons ready. No one knew if the Creche had left soldiers behind. Inside the station, Kelvin stood facing the Creche soldiers who had captured him. The aliens looked uncertain now, their weapons shaking in their clawed hands. They had seen their fleet destroyed. They knew help was not coming. But they were still dangerous, still armed, still capable of killing everyone in this room before they died. Drop your weapons, Kelvin said quietly. His voice sounded strange to his own ears, calm and cold. Drop them now and you might survive. The lead Creche soldier snarled, showing rows of sharp teeth. You think your warriors frighten us, human? We are Creche. We do not surrender to prey. Then you'll die, Kelvin said simply. The Creche raised his weapon. Kelvin tensed, knowing he could not dodge fast enough. This was it. He had survived the entire battle only to die now with rescue so close. The wall exploded inward. Human Marines poured through the breach, moving with trained precision. Their armor was heavy and practical, designed for function rather than appearance. Their weapons were solid slugs throwers, crude by galactic standards but devastatingly effective at close range. The Creche soldier who had threatened Kelvin spun toward the Marines. He never got his weapon up. 3 rounds hit him center mass, the kinetic impact throwing him backward. He crashed into the wall and did not move again. The other Creche soldiers dropped their weapons. Smart choice. The lead Marine, a tall woman with sergeant stripes on her armor, approached Kelvin. Her helmet retracted, showing a dark-skinned face with sharp eyes. Dr. Kelvin Chen? That's me, Kelvin said, his legs suddenly weak. How did you know? You're famous, Doc. The whole fleet knows about the human who held off the Creche with homemade traps. Admiral wants to meet you. She looked at Thelrax. You must be Ambassador Thelrax. Are you injured, sir? Thelrax clicked his mandibles in amazement. You know my name as well? We got the personnel manifest for the station before we jumped in. Made sure we knew who to look for. She pressed a finger to her helmet comm. Sergeant Ramirez to command. Dr. Chen and Ambassador Thelrax secured and unharmed. Proceeding with station sweep. Over the next hour, human Marines swept through the station. They found terrified researchers hiding in storage closets, injured diplomats trapped in sealed rooms, bodies in corridors where the fighting had been worst. The Marines worked efficiently, marking safe zones, clearing dangerous areas, setting up medical stations. Kelvin watched them work with a strange feeling in his chest. Pride maybe, or relief. These were his people, humans. 20 years ago, humanity had barely reached their own moon. Now they were here at the edge of space, fighting and winning against species that had traveled the stars for millennia. Thelrax stood beside him, equally amazed. Your Marines are very professional, very skilled. We've had a lot of practice, Kelvin said quietly. Humanity fought wars for thousands of years before we reached space. We know how to do this. But you are so young as a spacefaring species. How did you arrive so quickly? The message said you were weeks away. Kelvin shrugged. I don't know. I guess we'll find out. Admiral Okonkwo arrived on the station 3 hours later. She moved through the damaged corridors with her command staff, inspecting the repairs, talking to survivors, offering words of comfort. When she reached Kelvin and Thelrax, she stopped and studied them both carefully. Dr. Chen, she said, extending her hand. You did good work here. Those traps bought us the time we needed. Kelvin shook her hand, still feeling dazed. I don't understand, Admiral. Earth Command said you were weeks away. How did you get here so fast? Okonkwo smiled slightly. We lied. What? Earth Command's message was intentionally misleading. We've had the 3rd Expeditionary Fleet stationed 2 days from here for the last 6 months. Close enough to respond to emergencies. Far enough away that we didn't look threatening. When your distress signal came through, we were ready to move immediately. Thelrax's mandibles clacked in confusion. But why? Why position a fleet here? This is peaceful space. There has been no conflict in this region for decades. Because peace only lasts when you're ready for war, Admiral Okonkwo said. When humanity joined the galactic community, we studied history. We learned that peaceful species get conquered. Weak species get enslaved. We decided that we would be neither peaceful nor weak. But the Council, Thelrax protested, the treaties, the laws against military buildup. We followed the laws, Okonkwo said calmly. We just interpreted them creatively. The Council said we could only have 50 warships. They didn't say how big those warships had to be. They didn't say where we could position them. They didn't say what weapons we could carry. Kelvin started to laugh. He could not help it. So humanity has been preparing for war this whole time? While everyone thought we were harmless? We are harmless, Admiral Okonkwo said with a dangerous smile. Right up until someone threatens us or our friends. Then we become very harmful very quickly. The Kresh just learned that lesson. Let us hope others are smart enough to learn from their mistake. Captain Webb approached, his face serious. Admiral, we've finished the damage assessment. Station can be repaired, but it'll take time. Casualties are 38 dead, 67 injured. Could have been much worse. Could have been everyone, Okonkwo said quietly. She turned to Thelrax. Ambassador, the Council fleet will arrive in about 8 hours. They'll want a full report of what happened here. I suggest you tell them the truth. Tell them the Kresh attacked a peaceful station. Tell them humanity responded when no one else could. Tell them that we saved your lives. I will tell them, Thelrax said. But Admiral, there will be questions, concerns. Your tactics were very aggressive. Your weapons were very destructive. Some species will be frightened. Good, Okonkwo said bluntly.
Fear keeps people honest.
We don't want to conquer anyone. We don't want to threaten anyone. But we will not be victims. We will not watch our friends die because we were too weak or too far away to help. If that frightens some species, they should ask themselves why. She looked around at the damaged station, at the survivors being treated by human medics, at the Marines standing guard over Kresh prisoners. Humanity has arrived in the galaxy. We're here to stay, and we protect our own. The words hung in the air like a promise and a warning both. Outside the station, human warships maintained their guard, silent and deadly, waiting for any new threat to emerge from the darkness. The galaxy had changed today. The weak, primitive humans had shown their teeth, and those teeth were very sharp indeed. The Galactic Council fleet arrived exactly 8 hours later, right on schedule. 12 massive dreadnoughts dropped out of faster-than-light travel in perfect formation, their shields glowing with power, their weapons charged and ready. They came prepared for battle, ready to fight the Kresh, ready to save the research station. Instead, they found the station already saved and human warships standing guard around it like protective wolves. Counselor Veshmari stood on the bridge of the lead dreadnought, her crystalline body reflecting the light from the view screens. She was old, even by the standards of her long-lived species. She had served on the council for 300 years, She had seen species rise and fall, wars start and end, empires crumble and reform, but she had never seen anything quite like this. "Analysis," she commanded, her voice like wind chimes in a breeze. The tactical officer, a young Valesian with nervous hands, worked his console. "The human fleet consists of 18 warships, Counselor. They have established a defensive perimeter around the station. Scans show significant battle damage on both the station and several human vessels. We are also detecting debris from at least 7 destroyed ships. Configuration matches Kresh warship designs." "The humans destroyed 7 Kresh warships?" Veshmari asked slowly. "At least 7, Counselor. Possibly more. The debris field is extensive." Veshmari felt something she rarely experienced. Surprise. The Kresh were one of the most dangerous military powers in the galaxy. Their ships were powerful and their crews were experienced. Yet the humans, barely 2 decades in space, had destroyed 7 of them. "Open a channel to the human fleet commander," she said. Admiral Okonkwo's face appeared on the view screen. She looked tired but alert, her dark eyes sharp and intelligent. She saluted formally. "Counselor Veshmari, welcome. I apologize that we could not wait for your arrival before engaging the Kresh." "Admiral Okonkwo," Veshmari said, studying the human carefully. "We received the distress signal from the station. We came as quickly as possible. It appears we were not needed." "Not this time," Okonkwo agreed. "But your help is appreciated regardless. The station has wounded who need better medical care than we can provide. Perhaps your hospital ships could assist." "Of course," Veshmari said. "Admiral, I must ask, how did you arrive before us? Earth is weeks away from this location. We were the closest military force." Okonkwo smiled slightly. "With respect, Counselor, you were the closest Council military force. Humanity positioned the 3rd Expeditionary Fleet within 2 days of this station 6 months ago. We have been maintaining a quiet presence in this region." Silence fell over the Council flagship's bridge. Everyone stared at the human admiral in shock. 6 months? The humans had maintained a military fleet near Council space for 6 months without telling anyone? "That is highly irregular," Veshmari said carefully. "The Council was not informed of this fleet deployment." "The Council didn't ask," Okonkwo replied, her tone respectful but firm. "Humanity is not a Council member state. We are an independent species with our own territory and our own security concerns. We positioned our fleet where we felt it was needed." Veshmari chose her words carefully. "Some might interpret a military buildup near Council space as aggressive. Some might interpret it as prudent," Okonkwo countered. "The Kresh have been expanding in this direction for years. Everyone knew it. Everyone talked about it, but no one did anything about it. So humanity did something about it." On the station, Kelvin and Thelrax watched the exchange on a repaired view screen. Around them, human medics worked alongside Council medical teams, treating the wounded. The 2 groups worked together efficiently, sharing knowledge and resources. Thelrax clicked his mandibles thoughtfully. "Your admiral is very direct. Most species would be more diplomatic when speaking to a Council member." "Humans aren't most species," Kelvin said. "We're new here. We don't understand all the political games yet. Maybe that's a good thing. Or a dangerous thing," Thelrax said quietly. "The Council will not appreciate being told they failed to protect this station. They will not appreciate humanity acting independently. Would they prefer we let everyone here die?" Kelvin asked. Thelrax had no answer for that. 2 days later, an emergency council session was called. Representatives from 40 species gathered in the Great Chamber on the Council homeworld. The topic was obvious to everyone. What to do about the humans? Counselor Veshmari presented the facts. The Kresh attack. The human response. The destruction of the Kresh fleet. The evidence was clear and undeniable. Humanity had intervened in a Council matter without authorization. They had used weapons banned by Council convention. They had deployed military forces without proper notification. But they had also saved over 400 lives. The debate raged for hours. Some species wanted to censure humanity, to demand they disarm their fleet and submit to Council oversight. Others argued that the humans had only done what the Council had failed to do. The arguments grew heated. Finally, Ambassador Thelrax requested permission to speak. As a survivor of the attack, his voice carried weight. He stood at the speaker's podium, his compound eyes reflecting the lights of the Great Chamber. "Honored counselors," he began, his translator making his words clear to all. "I was on that station. I watched the Kresh attack. I waited for death or enslavement. And I watched the human fleet arrive when everyone said no help was coming. He paused, letting his words sink in. For 3 years, I studied humanity at that station. I wrote reports calling them primitive, aggressive, dangerous. I was wrong about many things. Yes, humans are aggressive. Yes, they use crude weapons and brutal tactics. But I learned something else about them during that attack. Thelrax's mandibles clacked together, a sign of deep emotion. I learned that humans keep their promises. When Dr. Chen sent that distress signal to Earth, his own government told him no help was coming. They lied to him, but they lied because they were already coming. They had positioned their fleet close by just in case something like this happened, because humans plan for the worst and hope for the best. He looked around the chamber at all the different species represented there. How many of our species would do that? How many of us would station a fleet far from home, spending resources and time just in case our friends needed help? The Council fleet arrived 8 hours after the attack began. The humans arrived in 26. The difference between those times is measured in lives saved. The chamber fell silent. No one wanted to admit it, but Thelrax was right. The Council had known the Kresh were a threat. Everyone had known. But no one had positioned forces to respond quickly. Everyone had assumed the treaties would hold, that diplomacy would prevail. The humans had assumed nothing. They had prepared for the worst, and when the worst came, they were ready. Another voice spoke up. It was Counselor Dreth, a warrior species known for their military traditions. The humans used nuclear weapons. This is banned by council law. Admiral Okonkwo, attending the session via video link, responded immediately. Counselor, with respect, Earth is not a council member. Council law does not apply to us. We used the weapons we had, the weapons that were most effective. If the council wishes to ban certain weapons, perhaps they should also ensure they have the military strength to enforce those bans without needing said weapons. It was a bold statement, a dangerous statement. But no one could argue with the results. The Kresh had been defeated. The station had been saved. Lives had been preserved. Veshmari stood, her crystalline body chiming softly. This council must make a decision. Do we censure humanity for their actions? Or do we acknowledge that they did what we could not? The vote took an hour. When it was done, the results were clear. Humanity would not be censured. Their fleet would be allowed to remain in position. In exchange, humanity would coordinate more closely with council forces and would participate in joint defense initiatives. It was not a perfect solution, but it was a practical one. Admiral Okonkwo received the news on the bridge of the Indomitable. She nodded slowly, unsurprised. The galaxy was learning what humanity already knew. Sometimes you had to show your teeth before anyone took you seriously. Send a message to Earth Command, she ordered. Mission successful. Station secured. No further Kresh activity detected. Recommend we expand our patrol range and add 2 more fleets to this region. Captain Webb raised an eyebrow. Expanding our presence? The Council might not like that. The Council will adapt, Okonkwo said. They're politicians. They know which way the wind is blowing. She pulled up a star chart on her personal display, studying the region around human space. So much territory, so many potential threats. The Kresh were just one danger among many. How many ships do we have under construction back home? She asked. Last I heard, 43 in various stages of completion, Webb replied. The shipyards are working around the clock. Okonkwo nodded. Good. We'll need them. On the station, Kelvin stood in the observation deck looking out at the stars. The damage had been repaired. The wounded had been evacuated. Life was slowly returning to normal, except nothing would ever be truly normal again. Thelrax joined him, the ambassador moving quietly despite his size. They stood together in comfortable silence, watching the human warships on patrol outside. You changed everything, you know, Thelrax said finally. Before this, humanity was seen as weak, unimportant. Now everyone knows you are dangerous. Is that a bad thing? Kelvin asked. I do not know, Thelrax admitted. But I know this. When the Kresh came, when death was certain, you humans came for us, not because you had to, not because of treaties or laws, but because you chose to, because you decided we were worth saving. He looked at Kelvin with his compound eyes. That is the kind of species I want as a friend. That is the kind of species I want in the galaxy. Kelvin smiled. We're not perfect, Thelrax. We're aggressive and stubborn and we break a lot of rules. Yes, Thelrax agreed. But you show up. When it matters most, when everyone else says it is impossible, you humans show up. In the darkness of space, the human warships continued their patrol, silent guardians watching over their friends. The message had been sent, written in fire and steel and nuclear light. Humanity had arrived in the galaxy. They would protect their own. They would defend their friends. And they would never ever abandon those who needed them. The galaxy would have to learn to live with that. For better or worse, humanity was here to stay.